Zwillman expanded into labor racketeering during the waning days of Prohibition. And by 1930, he had seized control over the Screen Operators Union up and down the East Coast and parlayed that into shares in some of the big Hollywood studios. And you don't think there's any mind control in America? At this time, Doris Sherry ran an amateur drama group at the YMHA in Newark, New Jersey. Childhood friend Zwillman sent Sherry out to the West Coast and installed him at Metro Goldwyn Mayer, MGM. When Zwillman got into trouble with the IRS in the late 1950s, some of his syndicate associates became convinced that he might betray some of the mob's most closely held financial secrets. And on February the 27th, 1959, he was found hanging from a pipe in the basement of his 20-room West Orange, New Jersey mansion. According to Federal Bureau of Investigation reports, Sherry attended the funeral. In the FBI memo citing Sherry's appearance at the Zwillman funeral, the Bureau delivered a kind of eulogy to the mobster, citing an article from the New York World Telegram. The FBI memo read, quote, "Nobody followed so successfully for so long the approved underworld formula for success, from rags to rackets to riches to respectability," end quote. And folks, if the rags to respectability formula were to be applied to organizations, the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith would be first on the list of success stories. For the past 2 decades, Wall Street lawyer Kenneth Bailkin has been Mr. ADL, a long-standing member of the League's National Executive Committee. Bailkin served from 1982 through 1986 as the League's national chairman. It was on his watch that gangster Mo Dalitz got the ADL's prestigious, quote, Torch of Liberty, end quote, prize. That junk bond swindler Michael Milken poured millions of dollars into the launching of the League's A World of Difference propaganda campaign to wreck American public education, and that accused drug money launderer Edmund Safra got Bailkin and the ADL to mediate a corporate divorce between his banking empire and the American Express Company. In return for Bailkin's effort to salvage Safra's badly tarnished reputation, the ADL received a $1 million tax-exempt payoff from him. But Bailkin's real claim to fame, folks, is that he was a simple figure in the doping, the drugging of America. Without Kenneth Bailkin's behind-the-scenes legal maneuvering, the Medellin cartel would have had a far more difficult time establishing a beachhead in the United States. In much the same way Bailkin quieted the potentially stormy divorce between Edmund Safra and American Express, he brokered the marriage between renegade financier Robert Vesco and the Medellin cartel's chief of logistics, Carlos Leder Rivas. As a result, the dope smuggling routes through the Caribbean into the United States were consolidated, and the streets of America were flooded during the 1980s with marijuana and cocaine. Now, this sordid story began in 1970, when Kenneth Bailkin, the senior partner at the Wall Street law firm of Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, helped engineer Robert Vesco take over the Investors Overseas Service, a Swiss-based mutual fund that was founded by Bernie Cornfield with startup funding from the Swiss-French branch of the Rothschild family. IOS was a front for Meyer Lansky's international crime syndicate. IOS salesmen traveled the globe carrying suitcases full of cash across international borders. Some of the money came from local investors, but the bulk of it was hot money gained from the Lansky syndicate's dope gambling, prostitution, and extortion rackets. Now, this method of money laundering was labor-intensive and primitive compared to today's high-speed electronic wire transfers. It was nevertheless efficient. The cash eventually wound up in numbered accounts at some of Switzerland's most corrupt and secretive banks. Some of the banks, ladies and gentlemen, linked to the IOS apparatus, like the Geneva-based International Credit Bank, or BCI, and the Nassau, Bahamas-based Bank of World Commerce were flagrant fronts for the Lansky syndicate. While BCI was owned by a senior officer of the Israeli Mossad named Tibor Rosenbaum, BCI's office manager, Sylvian Ferdman, was identified by Life magazine in 1967 as one of Lansky's top bagmen, and World Commerce Director Alvin Malnick was Lansky's accountant. When Lansky and his controllers decided to shift the center of their underground banking operations from Switzerland to the Caribbean as part of a planned expansion of cocaine and marijuana smuggling into the United States, with the cooperation and the help of the intelligence community and the military, it was the ADL and Bailkin that engineered the move. First, the ADL's Minneapolis, Minnesota apparatus, known inside the league as the Minneapolis Mafia, which ran the notorious Kid Can, or Isidore Blumenfeld, organized crime ring, provided the money for a local Hebrew school teacher turned business entrepreneur named Meshulam Riklis to buy up a large block of shares of iOS stock. Once Riklis had amassed enough stock to control the company, he turned around and sold all his shares to Vesco. Vesco was represented in the transaction by Kenneth Bailkin. You see, the circle was now complete. Vesco's next step was to oust Bernie Cornfield as the president of iOS and take over the job himself. Over the next several years, ladies and gentlemen, a total of $270 million was siphoned out of iOS accounts in Switzerland. Officially, the money was never found, and Robert Vesco conveniently fled the United States one step ahead of the FBI and the IRS. The Cornfield to Riklis to Vesco transaction may have been largely a wash of Lansky syndicate dollars. From Prohibition onward, the Minneapolis Kid Can gang had been handlers of Lansky money. Kid Can eventually moved to the Miami area and was a key player in Lansky's big-time move into southern Florida Gold Coast real estate. However, folks, not all of the money siphoned out of iOS by Vesco was family cash. A lawsuit was brought in U.S. District Court in New York City in 1980 by some of the independent investors who had lost their shirts in the looting of iOS. While not revealing the whereabouts of the missing millions, the civil suit identified Bailkin and the Bank of New York as partners of the fugitive financier in the scheme. On July 31st, 1980, federal judge D.J. Stewart ordered Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher to pay $24.5 million to a group of iOS investors and ordered the Bank of New York to pay $35.6 million. The case file, which fills 20 cartons stored at the Federal District Court warehouse in Bayonne, New Jersey, shows that Bailkin was the evil genius behind the entire looting scheme. A year before the court ordered Wilkie, Farr, and the Bank of New York to pay up for their role in the looting of iOS, some of that money had been used by Vesco to purchase Norman's Cay in the Bahamas. Vesco's partner in the deal was Carlos Leder Rivas, a small-time Colombian car thief and marijuana smuggler who had recently gotten out of jail in Florida. Leder, an unabashed supporter of Adolf Hitler, who would later use some of his smuggling profits to found a neo-Nazi radical environmentalist political party in Colombia, fit neatly into the ADL scheme with his family ties back in Colombia to leading figures in the then emerging Medellin cartel. By 1980, the Vesco-Leder-owned Norman's Cay was serving as the command center and transshipment depot for a massive marijuana and cocaine trafficking operation protected by the intelligence community from Medellin into the United States. For several years, while running the Norman's Cay operation, Vesco skipped from the Bahamas to Costa Rica to Nicaragua, buying up local politicians and newspaper editors, and always miraculously staying one step ahead of an FBI that never really seemed intent upon capturing the fugitive money men. In fact, it was just a show.